Hello, everyone. Welcome to On the Move, a show where we share transportation, sales, and marketing success stories. I'm Jennifer Purpose Romaine, the Executive Director at the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, which is a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals in transportation and logistics. And today on the show, I have Whitney Ennis, who is the VP of Marketing and Communications at Trailer Bridge. Welcome to the show, Whitney.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, I have known you for a few years, but I really love doing these interviews because you get to kind of hear people's stories. You get to know them a little bit better. So I would love to kind of know your origin story. What got you involved in transportation and what kept you here?
Well, I would love to tell you. I think my story starts when I was a kid. My dad was a truck driver. It's something that I love to talk about and tell everyone. He was behind the wheel for almost 30 years. Most of that time, he was an owner operator. So growing up, I always had a semi in my backyard, and there were a few summers that I would ride along with him on his rides and on his routes. And so it was a part of who I was. It was a part of our family. But after I graduated with my degree in communications, I was offered a position at a maritime distribution company. And that really kind of propelled my career in that path. And so I've just kind of fell in love with the people and it just stuck. And as I thought about where I wanted to be in the future as far as my career goes, Jacksonville has a huge transportation logistics industry. And so it just felt right to be within the niche of TNL. Even though I work in marketing and communications, I can have a specialty, and it's just kind of stuck for me. I spent about 5 years at the Jacksonville Port Authority, where I created so many wonderful friendships, and that's where I was first introduced to TMSA, and just had the opportunity to really grow my skill set, build my network, and really I think that that's where my career has really propelled forward, just from the information that I got to learn, having that experience in a public sector type organization where you learn about different types of messaging and the political landscape that goes into a port and different things. So really enjoyed that 5 years, and then had the opportunity to step over to Trailer Bridge, where I took more of a leadership position, got the opportunity to manage a team. I've been here almost 3.5 years, and I love it.
That's crazy that it's been 3.5 years. It seems like that just happened. But yeah, I guess I'm approaching my 3-year anniversary here at TMSA, which both seems like that just happened too, but time flies. I love that part of your story where
Yes.
the transportation industry and trucking just is a part of you and that you love talking about it so much. And I think that's a part of your personal brand, which is something else that you love talking about. Really thinking through how, as marketers, we can amplify our brand messaging and really get that out. Can you talk about why you think that is so important and how people can do it better?
So I definitely believe that my dad's story with being a truck driver and my childhood growing up is definitely a part of my personal brand, because it's connected to my why. And that really, when we think about our personal brands, we have to have that element, right? And personal branding is really about building trust, right? We as individuals want to do business with people that we like, that we know, and that we trust. And so we get those things and we get those elements by putting ourselves out there, by developing our personal brand, by building our network within whatever industry that we're in or whatever community that we're serving, whether that be a professional or a personal one. I believe that it is the future. Our world is very connected digitally, but we're also, when you look at our workforce today, we have so many different generations. And the younger generations are looking to do business with, to work at places that share their beliefs, that share things that they're passionate about. That is about putting yourself out there, building that personal brand so that people can connect with you, and whether they want to do business with you or they want to work with you. That's why personal branding, I think, is really important. Um, when we talk about it here at Trailer Bridge, I like to share a study that was done by Brand Builders Group, which is owned by Rory and AJ Vaden, which Rory Vaden wrote Take the Stairs. I'm not sure if you've ever read that book. It's really, really good if you have it.
Put it on my list.
But this Yes, add that one to the list. I absolutely love it. It's a quick read. But in this study, they looked at the trends in personal branding and how it was impacting decision making. How was it profitable? Also, how do personal brands impact corporate brands and vice versa? Whenever we think about influence marketing and how an influencer can promote your brand positively, or maybe one bad choice or one bad mistake can hurt your corporate brand. So I would encourage people to go out and look at that study. There's a lot of interesting facts, and it reflects data across all generations, and it helps you understand how you're landing on different people based on their generation and what they believe or what they find to be useful. And it's very interesting, and it will totally, I think, change the conversation that you're having around personal branding.
I think it is really important, and I've done a lot of like generations in the workplace um, studies and work and reading and all of that. And I agree, the younger generations really care about those elements, and they want to work for people and work with people who share the same, like they care about the same things, or like they are more inclined to work for companies who care about different elements about giving back or whatever that looks like. And so I think it's important that leaders are also caring about personal branding, and that isn't just your marketing person or just your sales team that is really out there. And I know a lot of leaders feel like they might be too busy to engage in personal branding exercises, which everyone is busy, so that is partially true. But how do you really convince your higher ups, the leadership team, to engage, to support, to really prove that ROI on making an investment in building personal brands?
I think it's a process, right? And it's one that you should approach with a lot of patience and a lot of honesty, because there may not be that direct ROI right away, right? You may actually never really have a hard dollar figure that says that's connected to that me building my personal brand. When I started at Trailer Bridge, I was encouraging my CEO, Mitch, to put himself out there a little bit more and do more. And he's a great public speaker. And so I always would give him these opportunities. And he's talked about this publicly. We joke about it. He was like, that's not really my thing. And it's not, right? And it's okay. It's okay for it to not be your thing. But he has stepped out of his comfort zone and put himself out there. And we have benefited from that. And I think the industry has benefited from him sharing his thoughts and his knowledge, because he has over 2 decades of experience in the industry. But when we talk about ROI, we recently had a great example, and we love talking about it. So we placed Mitch on a podcast earlier this year, the Freight Pod, and he shared his story. He talked about his past, his what he's doing today, the transformation that he's had here at Trailer Bridge. A week or so, maybe even a couple weeks later, he received a LinkedIn message from someone at a shipper, and this particular individual was saying, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast, on the Freight Pod podcast. I really connected with your story, and my colleague saw a Trailer Bridge backpack in an airport, and then my other colleague came in and started talking to me and asked if I'd heard from you because they heard you on the podcast." And so all of a sudden, here was this great story about ROI, because now we're working with that shipper and we're doing business with them, right? All because they felt like they connected to him in his podcast. So as a marketer, that's absolute gold, right? Like I am like, tell me all the things, let me keep track of that. And so it's about following the bouncing ball a little bit. It's also about having open communication through your teams, so that when an experience like that happens and they come into sales and they say, "Hey, I heard you're a CEO, or I saw you here, or I read this thing you put out on LinkedIn," that sales then translates that into marketing, and they share that win so that you can publicize that within your organization, within leadership, to tell the story of why it's important and show that ROI. It may not always lead to a customer. Maybe it leads to a great partnership. Maybe it begins the conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think podcasts are really good about, you get to spend a little bit more time in your story. Like, of course, being quoted in an industry article is really great because you're being shown as a thought leader on that particular topic that the article is. there's always space for these different engagements. But when you're on a podcast like this, there's no hard end to the story. Like, yes, here on the move, we're normally like 25 to 35 minutes. That's where we range. But there's other podcasts that are like 10 minutes and some that are like 3 hours. Like, it's just based on the conversation and in the different flow of things. And I think you're able to own your own story a little bit more because you have a little bit more airtime, if you will, to tell it. So I think that was really great that he was able to do that and walk through those steps, and that people then related to that whole story. That's really powerful.
Right. Because that's really about personal branding, right? People want to feel connected. And I think a lot of time we look at personal branding from a digital perspective and how we're putting ourselves out on LinkedIn, or how are we placing ourselves in a podcast or in a video interview. But the face-to-face meetings, conferences are back in, they're thriving. And so I think that we can't forget that personal branding, there has to be an alignment of the way you project yourself digitally and the way you show up in a face-to-face interaction with a partner or a customer or a future employee. So, it's easy to think about, am I posting on LinkedIn? Is my LinkedIn profile up to date? Did I have a great podcast interview? But how are you interacting on the show floor? When you go to a conference, are you connecting with people and really engaging in those conversations and being open to share, right? You don't have to share your whole life story, but if I really care about being a member of TMSA, and I have that open conversation with somebody that I'm talking to on the floor about advocating for the industry in a different way, that's really also a very important part of your personal brand. And so I like to always remind people internally here at TripleBridge that as much as it's as easy as it is to build your personal brand behind a computer and to write out your words and then to post them, it's also really important to get involved in your community, whether that's an organization like TMSA that's like a national representation, or some of the work that I do here locally in Northeast Florida, where it's a little bit more drilled down into the network that's immediately in my community.
That's a perfect segue into our next question, because that was one of the things I find fascinating about you, is that you really do advocate for the transportation industry, and especially in the Jacksonville scene. So you are a volunteer here at TMSA, which we are so thankful for. You've been an active part back when you were at Jacksport and now at Trailer Bridge, but you're also really active in the Propeller Club at the Port of Jacksonville, and you even served as the president back in 2021 through 2022. So can you talk more about why it is that you serve and why you think that's so important? I know you touched a little bit on that, like that's your personal brand. You think it's important to do that and to represent who you are, but why is that a core piece of Whitney?
So during my time at Jacksport, part of the message, when you're working at a port, is you're promoting the economic development of a thriving seaport and how it's supporting the jobs of the individuals in your community. And as somebody whose childhood was shaped by my dad having a really great job as a truck driver, it just felt like a very honest conversation that I was having with my community. And, initially when I got involved in the Propeller Club, it was about supporting the role I had at the Jacksonville Port Authority, but it was also about building my network. I was thinking long-term career path, but the more that I got plugged in, the more that I started developing these really, really special relationships with all different type of people. There were people who were distributing parts to the industry. We were talking to bar pilots and forming relationships with those guys and gals that are doing some incredible things. And it's just, you start getting to know people and it becomes your extended family, almost, so to speak. And you care about them and you all work together to make the community what it is. And so it became very special. And I think anytime that you volunteer into an organization like the Propeller Club, you are investing your time, your talents into something that's bigger than yourself, and you start to really care about it. And I became very invested probably in the success and the growth. And there were a few hard years. We had 2020 where we had to very quickly shift because you had in-person events and now you couldn't do that anymore. And so how do we sustain this organization that has been around since the 1930s through a global pandemic and make sure that we come out on the other end successfully? And then coming out of COVID, there was that weird time where it was like we're doing in-person events, we're not doing in-person events. People are ready. Oh, no, people aren't ready. You know, do you remember that? It was like, COVID's gone, COVID's back, COVID's gone. And so it's all, you know, you have this board of volunteers that are trying to figure it out all together. And it's like the battle wounds and scars just kind of create relationships that you never knew that you would ever have. But I'm so grateful for them. And, you know, following in the footsteps of women who have kind of charted the path for the organization, I think was really special for me. Whenever I was president, we had our big State of the Port address, and it actually fell on International Women's Day. And I think I was like number 8 or number 9 when it comes to like the female leaders of the org club. And so it kind of all like came together. And I like to say that in that moment, I kind of felt like I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And that's a really special moment. And I think that when I look at you and the work that you do with TMSA, it just feels like you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and what you're doing in the work that you do for TMSA. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's at least how it's projected externally.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. It is. I in a twofold for me. One, I've never been a person who had like a linear line of a career. Like I started as a journalist, and then I worked for PR Newswire, and then I went back to journalism, and then I switched to marketing, and then I worked at an agency, and then I worked at a tech firm as the marketing person, and all of those things kind of put me here. And so it's the first job I've ever had where I feel like all of my skill sets are challenged and not just like a one little piece of me. And so it keeps me on my toes. There's always a million things going on at TMSA. And so being able to oversee all of it and be able to execute on all of it is really impactful for me as a person. I get bored easily if I'm not challenged. So I really like that piece of it. And then on the other side, like how you were talking about like being passionate and caring about what you're doing. I mean, in that time period that you described, that COVID and then moving out of COVID, but are we in COVID? I mean, I was on the board of directors at TMSA during that. And we knew that the previous management firm was looking to kind of hand the association over to somebody else to push TMSA into whatever needed to come next, because sales and marketing people in the industry had different needs coming out of COVID than what they had before. So I remember that the conference in 2021 for TMSA was my first conference back after COVID in person. I remember every parent that woke up that day looking refreshed because it was the first time they had sleep for crazy.
That was Nashville, right? Weren't we in Nashville for 21?
Yeah.
That was me. I was that parent.
Yeah, me too. I was like, oh my God, this is what it's like to sleep through the night. I forgot. But then we were thinking about who could lead and who could take over. And it like coming out of that conference, I was like, what if I do it? And it just like, that was the beginning of October. And in November 1st was when I was publicly announced as the new leader. And so it all happened kind of fast. But then I think about, being in the right place at the right time, because I get asked, like, if you look at my resume, no, I've never run an industry association. No, that wasn't a skill set I had, but what I had was a passion for it, a passion for the mission of TMSA, and experience and exposure to the organization, because I had volunteered on the education committee. I was on the board of directors. I was leading the marketing committee. So I actually was in all of the systems already and already had like process improvements that I wanted to do as just a volunteer, let alone if that's like what I could actually commit my time to. So I do think that we put ourselves in the right positions, and if we just kind of let life do the work a little bit, then it'll gear us. And I just like to be prepared for whatever comes next, and to not be afraid to take the opportunities. And I feel like that's kind of what this was.
Well, I think whenever we think about work, it's like our satisfaction in the workplace or in the work that we do, right? Having an impact, whatever that looks like for you, if you feel like you're making a difference in a way that is meaningful to who you are, or if you have real relationships, or if you have you feel like you have connection, that's where satisfaction really comes from. And and I think that job satisfaction is so key. And I look back at the roles I relationships really mattered. The challenge of this role really kept me going. And so when you think about, when we look at the Propeller Club and why was that so important to me, and why do I, I've stepped off the board to make room for new and fresh faces, but I was on the board for 8 years. Why did I do that for 8 years with 2 kids and, all the things? It's because I felt passionate about it, because I enjoyed the relationships and the camaraderie, and because I wanted to see it move forward. And, I think you can still be a volunteer. You can still be a champion of an organization, even if you're not on the board, right? There's ways for you to support it, but it's also about loving your community. Like, I love Jacksonville. I would shout it from the rooftops. And so being a part of the Propeller Club and being able to tell our version of the Jacksonville story, which is thriving seaport and lots of transportation logistics qualities that make it a great place for companies to come. It was the perfect storm for me.
I love that. And I also wanted to say a big congratulations for you, because you were recently recognized as a rising star as a woman in supply chain by Supply and Chain Demand Executive in Food Logistics. So being a woman in supply chain, you've talked about some of those experiences, like leading the Propeller Club on International Women's Day, but what does that type of award mean to you?
It's incredibly special, and I'm still a little bit pinching myself. I'm like, are you sure? Because I look at some of the other people that they've announced, and I'm like, you read my application, you put us together, and you think that we're the same, just because there's so many incredible women on the list, including yourself. And so I'm really proud to be included in that circle, and love that I get to share it with 2 of my colleagues here at Trailer Bridge, Ann Phelps and Casey Swanson. And so we'll be up at the conference in November. But usually I think when you're a marketer, and in the role that I've had, I've always been the person that's written the nomination forms for these types of awards. And so I did write my own nomination alongside the others, just because that's my responsibility in the organization. So it always felt awkward to tout your career and what you've done and the successes that you feel proud of. But at the same time, I'm really grateful to be included, because I have worked really hard to get to where I'm at. And it's something that is really important to me. And so to have industry colleagues and industry people who I respect look at that and say that the impact that you've made deserves to have your name on this list, it just means the world to me. I'm really grateful.
I love that. And I think a lot of women in this space love seeing each other and advocating for one another, because we do work in a male dominated industry, but it's something that we're here, and there's more of us coming to the table and celebrating each other, which is fantastic. And I do think that as a woman, you are balancing a lot, because a lot of us are also like the organizers and planners in our real lives too. And many of us are working moms and trying to balance that. I was actually thinking, you were talking about like how when you volunteer together, you become kind of family with one another. And I was just thinking about, I was on a committee call earlier, and I said Monroe, which is my son's name. And like, everybody knew who I was talking about. Like, everyone has known my son. He's come to TMSA events. Like, he came to the Savannah Bananas game in 2023 and like handed out the little foam fingers that we made and stuff. And so you do kind of have that camaraderie, but how do you balance being a mom and being a working professional and and volunteering and giving back to your community? It's a lot to balance. And how do you kind of do it all?
Well, I'm sure you didn't know this, but I'm a personal shipper to 2 rising baseball stars. I have 2 boys, and so who both do a lot of travel baseball. So when I'm not at work, I am their personal shipper all over the state of Florida. But I think that so whenever I think about that and I think about work, balance is a little bit of a joke, right? What is balance? I'm not really sure. And I've seen a lot of people talk about it differently. Like, can we have true work-life balance? I'm honest with yourself about what season you're in, right? What's really important to you, and also making sure that the people around you understand that. And so, I've been very fortunate that I have a very strong support system. My parents have always helped with my kids. even sometimes, even still to this day, they'll pick my kids up from school and allow me to work late. Or if I have a training that runs late, or if I have an event in the evening, they are picking up my boys, or my husband, Brandon, is taking somebody to baseball practice. And so it's a huge support system. So I would say that I couldn't have done all of this without that, because that would be a lie. And I don't want to lie, and I want to give them credit. But, I think that it's really about honesty to yourself, right? This is really important to me. I want to invest in building my career right now, or I want to be at every single thing for my children. And that's the most important thing. And so I'm going to put my career on maybe a little bit of not a pause, but we're just going to kind of stay right here and kind of grow this way versus maybe growing up. That's perfectly okay, but you have to be honest. And I've also been really transparent with my leadership that my kids are really important, and we got baseball and we have school. And so sometimes if I'm not sitting right here, I may be at a baseball field with my laptop out and I'm working. I'm really passionate about the work I do at Trailer Bridge. I love being a part of this organization, and I'm committed to the growth and supporting the growth. It just might look different from day to day, but I'm the same as you. Like, everybody knows my boys. The boys come in sometimes to the office, and so they know my team knows them. And whenever, if there's an afternoon that I have to pop out because my youngest is not being nice, which is usually the case, everybody just kind of laughs and says, "Oh, well, that's Grant," and it's just a part of our relationship as a team. And so I think that's where honesty really comes into play. So
I think that's so important, the honesty factor, and just knowing where you're at. And that balance is whatever that looks like, and it can change from day to day. Like, I was laughing because this was the topic you're like, I would love to talk about. And I'm like, okay, great. And I'm building the questions while I'm sitting at the ninja gym with my laptop, because Monroe is a ninja. And then, I'm planning, we have Executive Summit, which this will debut on October 9th. So Executive Summit will be the day after this, but like, we're recording this now, which is October 1st. And then, Friday, I have to go to the farm for the second grade field trip, which is the Friday before Executive Summit. So like, life is a little crazy. And so I also think it's important to be flexible with time too. Like, my son loves that I'm a room parent. He has told me I have to do it until that's not a thing anymore. Because I told him at some point, you grow up and they don't have room parents anymore. It's not. At some point, there may be another mom that wants to go on the field trips, and we have to let other people have these opportunities too. But like, he loves Halloween. It's his favorite thing. And so I always want to go to the Halloween party. Like, that's something that I really care about. And going on the field, I've gone to every field trip he's ever had so far while leading TMSA. He gets really proud of himself when he can say TMSA. He wants to switch the S and the M all the time, and he gets super proud. And he relates it to like, he's in Cub Scouts, and he's like, okay, like, I hang out with my friends and do things together for like my career at Cub Scouts, and mommy leads her organization for her friends at TMSA. And so it's just, I don't know, I think it's important to incorporate that, and it's cool. And on the other side of things, just like, my parents came to Elevate this year, and my mom came to the opening, and she came to the opening reception, and they came to networking events. And because I didn't think they understood what I did. And so I'm like, just come. You guys are both retired. But I feel like when you can engage your real life with your work life, it becomes more fruitful, because everyone's then, helping to help you with that balance. So, yeah.
Well, I love that you mentioned that too, because I want my boys to know what I do, and I want them to see the work that I'm a part of, and I want them to be proud of me. My husband also works on the waterfront. He's in the industry too. So it's just, we're just all doing it. We're all involved in some level of the transportation logistics industry, but that provides a little bit of understanding for everyone, and some grace. And I think that, when they feel proud of what mommy does, or, my dad was a driver for Trailer Bridge before he quit driving. And so, like, I think he's really proud that I work here, and I'm certainly proud that he worked here as well. And so it's kind of transparency and, like you said, and the honesty that I think is really important. But I like what you said about flexibility and knowing that there will be some weeks and some months that work needs me and I have to prioritize what's right in front of me because it's just a busy season. But there's also been times where I said I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks because my son has a big baseball tournament up in New York, and this is something we've been waiting for and dreaming for. And so I'm unplugged, and that's exactly where I need to be, and I'm going to be there. And so it's giving yourself that space. And then let's not forget it's self-care, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't pour into others. And so let's not forget that. And so I know I posted about hot yoga a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and everybody was talking about it. I think we should do it while we're in New York Executive Summit. We should just have like a group hot yoga class. So
I'll try it. I have never taken a hot yoga class. I do take yoga. I actually have yoga on Tuesday nights, so that's today. But um, but I'll be open to it. And that is something we've tried to incorporate at TMSA, like doing. We actually had a wellness room at Elevate, and there was a yoga mat in there too, because sometimes you just need to center yourself. But I do think the self-care is really important, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's definitely the thing I fail at the most, like making space for everyone else and not myself. But really thinking about how to do that and fit that into your day too is really important, because it's easy to lose yourself in the chaos of everything else, for sure. So
you have to be well.
You do. You do. Okay. So this takes us to my last question, which is always my favorite one to ask everyone who comes on the show. If you could go back in time and advise a younger Whitney anything, and this could be personally or professionally, when would you go back to and what would you tell her?
That's a really great question. And it's funny that you asked that, because I was just listening to a podcast with Rachel Hollis, and she was talking to a high performance coach, and he said, "What iteration of you are you on?" And I was like, wow, that's deep. I'm not even sure which iteration of Whitney I'm on. I mean, I definitely could say like pre-children Whitney, post-children Whitney, but it was interesting. So when when we looked at this question kind of in preparation, I thought, wow, there's a lot of different iterations of Whitney that could use some new advice. But I think that the one that I go back to, and it's funny, I won my high school pageant whenever I was a junior. So we're going back to 17, 18 years old here. So we're going back a long time. So I won my high school pageant. When you won your high school pageant, you got to go to kind of like the overall city pageant, where you competed against the other girls from all the other different high schools. And it was a process, but part of it was you had to prepare a speech that if you made the top 5, you would give. I just assumed that I don't know if I just didn't care, or I didn't think that I would actually make top 5. So I half wrote a speech. I didn't really practice, which is kind of unlike me, because I was very involved in high school. I still am today. Not in high school, but just very involved. I want to perform. I want to do well. And so I'm not sure why I didn't give this speech more of a serious attention, or that I didn't really care. I'm not really sure. But my mom told me, she's like, you need to practice the speech. And she kept telling me over and over. And I kind of half did it, but didn't really listen to my mom. And so then pageant comes, and I somehow end up in the top 5, and then I didn't really know my speech very well. And so I got up in front of a very large audience and flumbled through a speech as best as I could. And I talked with my hands a lot, because I think I was so nervous, because I wasn't confident in what I was saying. And I didn't do my best, so to speak. And so I think my lesson, and what I would tell that Whitney, is practice the speech, do the work, and prepare to be in a position that you can win. I think in that moment, I was not preparing to be in a position where I could win. I just was satisfied with being in the group and just being there. And I never really invested the time to truly position myself in a way that I could end up with the crown. Not that that's what I needed, or, whatever. But when we think about where we are today as professionals, or when we think about our life, when you think about what it is that you want, or the thing that you're going after, are you positioning yourself to win? Are you doing the work? Are you practicing the speech? Whatever that is, whether it's, are you investing in your family time? Are you making time for self-care? Are you investing in your health? Or is it something that's related to your career? Are you doing the extra studying to learn the new tool that's out? I think as marketers, we could learn something new every day and still kind of be behind. But that's what I would tell my old self, my 18-year-old self. And when my mom hears this, she's probably going to be so happy that at least it made an impact. Because in the moment, I did not listen to her.
Yeah. She's like, however many years later, I'm in this to tell you that I was right then, as moms do. This might be my favorite lesson because I feel like I've spent my whole life just wanting to be prepared for opportunity and to be able to say yes or no to an opportunity based on what I wanted, not because of the situation. And so
Yeah.
I think that is a different way of saying that. Like, absolutely be prepared, be as prepared as you can be. And then one of my favorite quotes is, whatever got you to where you are won't keep you there. And that motivates me a lot because you can work really, really hard and get somewhere. But if you then stay stagnant and just stop learning, stop reaching, stop trying, you're not going to stay there. You're going to fall. And so I think that we're on a pretty similar wavelength in life with these thoughts.
Yeah. It's definitely, I'm certainly not doing pageants anymore. That was a long time ago. But I different and take away the lesson for today, at least.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the move with me, Whitney, and I'm excited to see you at the TMSA Executive Summit coming up. And thank you to everyone who listened. Hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you very much. See you.